What's up, YouTube, man? Back at it again. You guys know what we love doing on this channel, but we break down scary and creepy TikToks, man. TikToks that's gonna make you question reality, give you chills, raise your vibrations, anything and everything you can find right here on this channel, man. Like I said, I'm gonna begin some feedback from you guys. Like I said, you guys want me to kind of talk less during the videos and kind of save it for afterwards, man. Like I said, I'm still like getting new to this content, so I appreciate all your criticisms and feedback. So going forward, man, when you talk less, just reacting more. Me talking less and saving that for the end part. But that's that one in, bro. Found a banger for you guys today, man. Let's check it out. Selfies taken before
Selfies
death.
that were taken right before death, part 1. In 2014, Oscar Reyes participated in the Selfie Olympics and took a photo of himself hanging from his bathroom door. A few seconds later, he slipped and fell, hitting his head on the toilet and dying from severe blood loss. Andrew McCauley attempted to be the first man to kayak from Australia to New Zealand. He took this selfie and texted his family that he would be home soon, but drowned at just 30 miles away from the finish line. In 2011, 3 teens in Utah took this selfie together on the train tracks. It appears to be a happy, ordinary photo, but the glare on the right side of the screen is from the train that runs into them just a few seconds later.
What?
Have you ever wondered?
That's different, bro. Like all those people that didn't even know that freaking the tragedy that awaited them, bro.
How accurate police sketches are. I'm going to show you a sketch, then I'm going to show you the person that was arrested, and we're going to see. So this is the police sketch for the man wanted in the Delphi murder case, one of the most high-profile unsolved murders right now. For those who don't know, in 2017, 2 young girls, Abby Williams and Libby German, were murdered while out for a walk in the woods. And a few days ago, this man, Richard M. Allen, was arrested as a suspect in the murders. And Richard looks so different from that sketch that here's actually a photo of him posing next to it, completely unnoticed. A better comparison would actually be this photo that one of the girls posted to Snapchat, where she was able to get video and audio of the man before they were murdered. Details pertaining to the arrest are still under wraps, but I could definitely see how that man would be this man, more so than the police sketch.
Normal-looking photos that have a disturbing backstory. Part 25. In 2012, a group of 10 travelers from New Zealand boarded a hot air balloon. But during the landing process, the balloon collided with the power line, causing it to erupt into flames, killing all 10 people and the pilot on board. This is the last photo ever taken of Kim Wall, a journalist who was stabbed 15 times by Danish inventor Peter Madsen after she boarded his homemade submarine to interview him. This image shows brothers Nick and Jack Savage taken just a few hours before their death. Their mother found them dead in their sleep after experimenting the previous night with opioids just a few days after their high school graduation. This photo of Bart and Kevin Whitaker was taken a few hours before a hitman that Bart had hired attempted to kill his entire family after they returned home from a graduation dinner. Sadly, his father was the only member of the family who survived. Notice Bart's hand.
This man.
That is insane, bro. Hiring a hitman to take out the fam. You never know people's intentions.
Has been sentenced to 100 years in prison after doing the unthinkable to his daughter. Tony Valles is a 66-year-old from Helena.
What did he do?
On the 10th of July 2022, he was at home with his partner Heather. Tony's 8-year-old daughter Ariana and his 18-year-old son were also at the house at the time. Suddenly, 2 women entered the property who he believed were evicting him. He flew into a violent rage and grabbed a weapon from his bedroom. At this point, he began shooting. He shot Heather and she fell to the floor, and then he shot at his son. His 8-year-old daughter tried to escape and run from the terror, but she was hit with gunfire. She was on the stairs when she was hit by a bullet and she fell back. She tragically died after being rushed to hospital. After his daughter's death, Tony stated, "I'm sorry for all this. I can't undo what I've done. The pain and the misery will last a lifetime, and I'm sorry for all that." Tony was sentenced to serve 100 years in prison.
As you should, bro.
This is by far the worst love
crazy,
triangle
bro.
story I've ever heard of. In September of 2020, 31-year-old Armando Barone murdered his wife's co-worker when he found out that she was having an affair with him. 25-year-old Jonathan Emerald and 33-year-old Brittany Barone were together at a biomedical device company in New Hampshire. But on this specific day, Armando went through Brittany's phone and lost it when he discovered text messages between Brittany and Jonathan. He beat Brittany so bad that she passed out, but it doesn't end there, and let me warn you, it gets really disturbing. That night, after Armando threatened to take Brittany's life, he took her phone and texted Jonathan pretending to be her. He then lured Jonathan to a park where he shot him 3 times and then drove 200 miles to a campsite where he forced Brittany to decapitate his body. Armando ordered Brittany to bury Jonathan's head in the dirt and told her that once the sun came up the next morning, he would forgive her. He then left Brittany in the wooded area so that she can get rid of evidence, and 2 days later, officers found Brittany at the campsite, and that's when she confessed that something had happened. Brittany was sentenced to 3.5 to 7 years in prison on 3 counts of falsifying evidence, but she has been released. And Armando was sentenced to life in prison without parole.
My daughter gave birth to my 7 children.
That's insane.
My name is Joseph Fritz, and this is my terrible story. I built a secret basement under my house in Austria. There, I locked up my own daughter Elizabeth for 24 long years. I was a manipulative, domineering father. No one could have guessed what was going on in that basement.
He said that his daughter gave birth
I led
to
a double
his
life.
kids?
A normal husband and father on the top floor, and a monster in the secret basement. During the years I spent with that basement, I committed atrocities against my own daughter. Elizabeth had 7 children. 4 of them grew up with her in that secret basement.
He had 7 kids with his own daughter. He's a damn demon, bro.
While the other 3 lived upstairs with my wife and me, unaware of the truth. But in 2008, everything changed. One of the girls was born in the basement because Austin became seriously ill. I had to take her to the hospital, but I didn't know that would be the beginning of my downfall. The doctors asked questions. The police and media began to investigate. My terrible secret was revealed. The basement in which I had locked my daughter and children was discovered. In 2009, I was sentenced to life imprisonment. I'm now behind bars where I can't do anything to anyone. My story has shocked the world, and many people wonder how such a crime could go unnoticed for so long.
How, bro?
More information has been released
That's
recently
disgusting,
about the
bro.
killing of former
Own
university
damn
students at the
daughter.
University of Idaho, but the killer is still at large. On Sunday morning, 4 students were found stabbed to
Have you
death
seen
in
this
their
story,
beds near
bro?
campus.
The killer's still
2
at
other roommates were
large?
at home at the time upstairs, but both were unharmed. It's believed that their deaths occurred around 3 or 4 in the morning, though the 911 call was not placed until the following day. It's also now believed that they were asleep at the time of the attack. Initially, police believed that there was no further threat to the community, but they have since backtracked that. And as of now, they're looking for a K-Bar brand combat blade that they think was used in the attack. A live stream from a food truck actually shows Madison and Kaylee ordering food hours before the attack happened. In the video, this man can actually be seen behind the girls, walking around and looking at them, leading many internet sleuths to believe that he was somehow involved, but he has since been cleared by the police.
Always pay
Police
attention.
also released this updated timeline of events showing that Xana and Ethan were at a party and Maddie and Kaylee were getting food that night. A lot of this information has actually been uncovered by Kaylee's sister, who's taken a lot of the investigation into her own hands. And one thing that she wants people to know is that Kaylee called her ex-boyfriend 6 times that night, an hour before the attack happened. Right now, we don't know if that means anything, but it is something that she wanted out there. Classes have not been canceled on campus, but if you choose to not go, you will not be penalized. And if anyone has any tips or information on this case, you can call a tip line at 208-883-7180.
This is
they all just got wiped out like that.
ISIS execution videos you should never go looking for. Explain. The video that I'm about to explain is extremely brutal, and I don't recommend looking it up. The victim in the video is apparently a U.S. spy, and he is wearing an orange jumpsuit like most victims are in ISIS videos. The video is about 40 seconds long, and it begins with the victim standing up, but his arms have been chained to 2 trees, which forces him to stand up with his arms stretched out. What? One of the ISIS members then reads a statement accusing the victim of being a spy. 2 young boys who look like teenagers can be seen standing behind the victim. The boys have their arms raised above their heads like they are about to swing something, and upon looking closer, you can see the 2 boys are about to swing swords. The video then shows the 2 boys swinging the swords at the same time, and they cut off the victim's outstretched arms.
Damn.
They managed to cut them off in one swing, but this could be due to editing because ISIS loves doing that. You then get a close-up shot of one of the older ISIS members slitting the victim's throat. The camera sits in a still shot and zooms into the victim's eyes as he is being beheaded. The video then jump cuts and it shows the victim's headless and armless corpse. It also shows the victim's severed arms hanging from the trees by the chains. The video then concludes as an even younger child who is no older than 9 reads out a statement with his foot on the victim's severed head, and this is where the video concludes. ISIS execution videos are extremely hard to watch, and I don't recommend ever looking for them, or this one.
That's insane,
Please do yourself a favor and stay curious because this video is extremely brutal.
This former Disney music executive was charged with child sex abuse.
Guys.
This is John Healy himself, who's now in his 60s, and in 2017 he was charged with 3 felony counts of child sex abuse. All this had happened apparently a decade ago. He was accused of abusing one girl when she was 15 years old and then targeting another 11-year-old girl and abusing her all the way up until she was 15. When he was arrested back in 2017, John's Twitter profile only read one thing: Disney concerts and living to glorify God in all things. Now, when all of this happened back in 2017, I read that Disney terminated him immediately from his position. I mean, how could they not? These were some very graphic and disturbing allegations that were made against John. But if you go to his LinkedIn page and you scroll down a bit, it says that he still works at Disney. I don't know what that means, if it's true or not, but it's kind of...
Why the hell is he still at Disney? That whole page should have been eradicated.
Strange. In fact, I can't even find anything about how this case was ended. Hold up, now this is interesting. So I just stopped and really dug into the research about this guy, and I found that they dropped the charges in 2019 because there was a hung jury. They couldn't reach a decision on whether or not he was actually guilty of these crimes or not. Apparently, according to this news article that I'm reading, the people involved in the case did not want the charges to be dropped, but his defense team argued that since it was the 3rd trial that he was involved in, the case should be thrown out, and the judge complied and just threw all the charges out. So, I don't know, maybe he is still working for Disney. Maybe it does make sense. I don't really know. But it should be noted that allegedly the girls that he abused were from his own family. They were family members of his, and obviously they were minors. I guess we'll just never know the truth on this story.
Did this child help to solve her own murder? Nicole Koppler was 14 years old from Lima in Ohio. On the 19th of May 1999, she vanished. Her family was understandably very concerned, and this was only amplified when they made a sickening discovery. Up until her disappearance, it was revealed that she'd been spending time with a man called Glenn Fryer, who had a criminal record. Disturbingly, this was for SAing a young girl. It would be an agonizing wait for Nicole's family before there were any developments in this case, and horrifically, it would take a 12-year-old girl to be attacked before any light was shone. In 2002, Glenn was charged with R-ing the girl in question. Police ended up searching his house and made a worrying discovery. They found Nicole's ID and her diary. The diary had a very unsettling entry in it, dated May the 24th, 1999. This was just 5 days after she vanished. She'd written in the diary entry that she had run away from home intentionally but did want to go back. She wrote in her diary that the people that she was staying with would not let her leave. Unsurprisingly, Glenn became the prime suspect in her disappearance. Police were actually working on a theory that maybe Glenn had taken her with the intent of human trafficking and then potentially she could have resisted and he may have killed her by accident. He also may have killed her intentionally if she had resisted, as it was just too risky. Now, tragically, Glenn was never convicted of anything in relation to Nicole's case because just days after pleading no contest for the 2002 R, he took his own life in his police cell. It then wasn't until 2012 that Nicole's family could finally have some sort of closure in this case. Glenn's house taxes went unpaid and the house was abandoned for years. The council decided that it was unsightly and they needed to demolish the house, and as they did so, a discovery was made. The demolition team found human bones that were found to be Nicole's. Her family was finally able to put her to rest. This is the horrific case of Lee Rigby that stunned the UK. It was initially just a normal afternoon on the 22nd of May 2013. British Army soldier Lee Rigby was off duty in London. He was walking down Wellington Street when a horrific tragedy would occur. At this point, Lee was just 25 years old. He was a well-respected drummer and machine gunner from Manchester and was engaged with a 2-year-old son. He was an avid supporter of the charity Help for Heroes.
Pretty normal life.
On the day in question, 2 men, Michael Adebalejo and Michael Adebawole, were in the area. Just before 2:20 p.m, they saw Lee crossing the road. The 2 men launched a brutal attack. They drove a Vauxhall Tigra at him, which knocked him over to the floor. They then exited the car and launched into an attack with knives and a cleaver. A member of the bus noticed an incident and jumped off, expecting to just give first aid. The person thought that it was just a road traffic collision. She got a horrific shock when she realised that Lee was actually
you know what you're going to stumble upon.
While Lee was on the ground, she started engaging the attacker in a conversation and asking what on earth has happened. He started claiming responsibility for the attack and claimed that it was due to Lee being responsible for deaths of certain religious groups. A phone captured a video of one of the men stating his extremist propaganda to justify the attack. The attackers stayed at the scene while police were called. Both armed and unarmed police were deployed to the area, and as they arrived, the men charged at them. Armed police fired 8 times, wounding the men, and one of the men had his thumb shot off. Afterwards, it was revealed that both men were known to British security services.
Really?
The day after the murder, 8 people were arrested in connection, and 6 were freed on bail, and 2 released without charge. Both killers were found guilty of murder, the eldest getting a whole life term without parole, and the youngest receiving just 45 years. The Lee Rigby Foundation was set up to support bereaved military families. Recently, Lee's son received a Pride of Britain award for his fundraising work for Scottish soldiers in memory of his dad.
This is Roman Polanski, a known Hollywood pedophile, ex-husband of Sharon Tate's, and a very famous film director.
I'm sorry for pausing, y'all, but like I just said, like it seems like it's always in people of power, bro, and that Hollywood type of stuff that's known.
I'm going to warn you, this story has some very graphic details, so viewer discretion is advised. So if you don't know Roman Polanski's movies, he directed films like Rosemary's Baby, The Pianist, Chinatown, Oliver Twist. He has so many movies under his belt. But something that I didn't know about Roman Polanski is that his family lived in Poland during the Holocaust. His pregnant mother was murdered in a concentration camp, and he actually escaped by just running. Apparently, Roman had to roam the countryside for a long time, searching for safety, and German soldiers would even play games with him, like making him dance around while they fired bullets at his feet. Roman Polanski began his film career directing movies in Poland before he moved to America. And it was in the year 1967 when he was making a movie about vampires when he met his future wife, Sharon Tate. They quickly fell in love and married. Roman Polanski got Sharon Tate pregnant, and she eventually would become the star of one of his biggest movies of all time, Rosemary's Baby. And if you know anything about true crime, then you probably know the end to this story. Sharon Tate was actually one of the victims of the Manson family, headed by Charles Manson. Roman was in London at the time when Sharon Tate was brutally murdered by members of the Manson family. She was pregnant with Roman Polanski's child. Obviously just a tragic story all around. But that still does not excuse what was to come. So obviously after Sharon Tate was murdered, he went through a very dark time in his life. But eventually he returned to the world of cinema with the film Chinatown, starring Jack Nicholson. And on March 11th, 1977, just 3 years after he had finished filming Chinatown, Roman Polanski was at Jack Nicholson's house. And it was at Jack Nicholson's house where Roman Polanski gave a minor, a 13-year-old girl, drugs, alcohol, and then proceeded to assault her. This is his actual mugshot after his arrest. Now, Roman Polanski was arrested almost immediately, and he actually ended up agreeing to a plea bargain where he would have 5 of the 6 charges completely dismissed. But upon hearing that the judge was not going to go with the plea bargain and they were going to sentence Roman to 50 years in prison, he fled the country. That's right, the day before his sentencing, Roman Polanski got on a flight to London, and he hasn't been able to step foot back in the United States ever since. In 2009, however, when Roman was in Switzerland, he was arrested at the request of United States authorities. They held him for a few months. Hollywood, for some reason, rallied around him and said he should be a free man. And then he was cut loose. Switzerland denied the extradition request. Now, even past all of this, keep in mind Roman Polanski has never actually served his time for this charge in America. Other people have come forward and claimed allegedly that Roman Polanski assaulted them when they were minors. There was a German actress who claimed that Polanski assaulted her when she was 15 in 1972, an American artist who claimed she was assaulted by Polanski in 1975 when she was only 10 years old, And there's just so much darkness that really surrounds this guy's character and the allegations around him. And if you want to hear something really disturbing, go look up Quentin Tarantino defending Roman Polanski and basically victim shaming the minor. That is something you can't unhear. What do you think? Should he be extradited back to the U.S.?
This is the worst way somebody has ever died, and whatever you do, never look up the picture. This is a Sachi Achi, and he became the most radioactive man in history after a lab accident.
What the hell?
On September 30th, 1999, the 34-year-old Hisashi and 2 other co-workers were working at the Takamura nuclear plant in Takamura, Japan.
Nuclear energy, bro.
And they were put on an extremely tight deadline by their superiors. The plant converted uranium hexafluoride into enriched uranium for the purposes of nuclear energy.
Damn.
This usually involved a carefully timed multi-step process, but
it's nuclear energy, gotta be careful.
Attempted to take a shortcut to meet their deadlines, but this led to an horrific explosion of uranium solution that turned into a nightmare for Hisashi.
Damn, bro.
The plant underwent emergency evacuation, and the 3 men were immediately rushed to health. They all had been directly exposed to harmful radiation, but to different degrees.
Radiation levels was...
The sole survivor of the group was exposed to 3 sieverts of radiation. The second one was exposed to 10 sieverts of radiation. And Hisashi was exposed to a whopping 17 sieverts of radiation, which was more than any human in history.
He survived?
And by the time Hisashi arrived at the hospital, his body was already covered in burns. And his eyes were leaking blood, but his agony had just begun. 3 days after the accident, Hisashi was transferred to the University of Tokyo Hospital. Hisachi's lack of white blood cells and his non-existent immune response prompted experts to try a number of procedures to save him. Doctors tried countless skin grafts and blood transfusions, and even stem cell transplants, but sadly, none of these seemed to work.
Too much radiation.
Soon cried out, "I can't take it anymore. I'm not a guinea pig," just after 1 week of treatment. But although Hisashi begged for his death, his family insisted that doctors kept him alive to keep trying experimental treatments.
It's like he's a damn
Hisachi's skin began to melt off his body, and even after this, his relatives ordered his doctors to do whatever it took to keep him alive.
At some point,
all in
you
all,
gotta stop the
Hisachi was kept alive against his will for a disturbing 83 days.
Imagine the
At
torment
one
he was
point,
going
he
through.
suffered 3 heart attacks in 1 hour. Following the guidelines from his family, the doctors resurrected him again and again. Every time he died, he came back and suffered extreme brain damage. And on December 21st, 1999, Hisashi finally died of his last heart attack after multi-organ failure, and it was only then that his torture stopped. You really can't fathom the amount of pain this man was in until you see the photo of him. He doesn't even look human and kind of looks like an insect. The radiation poisoning is that bad, but I really don't recommend you look it up.
I won't.
But if you do, while you're looking at it, keep in mind, he was kept alive for 83 days in that state. Could you honestly imagine what was going through his head and what his body was feeling?
Bro. And he wasn't. That's insane, bro. It was a damn guinea pig. This has to be edit, right? I'm calling it this one, that video, that's an edit right there. Has to be. Unless the dog is sensing their energy or something.
This is one of the worst true crime cases in history. This is the case of Sylvia Lyon, who is a 16-year-old girl who, along with her younger sister Jenny, was left in the care of Jarud Benesweski by her parents. Jarud was a single mother with several children of her own. She agreed to take care of the Lyon sisters in exchange for a small amount of money every week. The Lyon parents were carnival workers and believed their daughters would be safe with Jarud. But that was far from the truth. Things took a horrific turn when Jarud and her children began to subject Sylvia to prolonged physical and emotional abuse. She was physically beaten, starved, and subjected to various forms of torture. Jarud's children and some neighborhood kids also participated in the abuse. Sylvia was kept locked in the basement where she endured unimaginable suffering. Jarud and the children not only beat Sylvia, but they also forced her to write degrading statements all over her own body, including phrases like, "I'm a prostitute and I'm proud of it." Sylvia was also burned with cigarettes, had her head shaved, and was often deprived of food and water. This abuse continued for months. On one occasion, as the family ate supper, Jarud, Paula, and a neighborhood boy named Randy force-fed Sylvia a hot dog overloaded with condiments, including mustard, ketchup, and spices. Sylvia vomited as a result and was later forced to eat her own vomit. On another occasion, Paula, who was Giroud's daughter, beat Sylvia in the face with such force that she broke her own wrist. Later, Paula used a cast on her wrist to further beat Sylvia. Giroud would also occasionally force Jenny, who was her younger sister, to strike her and beat her. And if she did not comply, they would just beat her.
Crazy,
Several
bro.
of Giroud's children's classmates frequently visited the house
Like
to both physically and verbally torment Sylvia. And with Giroud's active encouragement, these neighborhood children and her own routinely beat Sylvia.
She's their adult
Sometimes even
encouraging the
using her
kids
as a
to do
practice
it.
dummy in violent judo sessions. Also lacerating her body and burning her with lit cigarettes over 100 times. They also severely injured her genitals. To entertain Giroud and her teenage accomplices, Sylvia was forced at one point to strip naked in the family living room and masturbate with a glass Pepsi Cola bottle in their presence. And this was all for the enjoyment of this woman right here. And due to the increase in the frequency and the brutality of the torture and mistreatment of Sylvia, she gradually became incontinent, which is the uncontrolled leakage of urine. She was then denied any access to the bathroom, being forced to wet herself. And as a form of punishment, Giroud threw Sylvia into the basement and tied her up. Here, Sylvia was kept naked, rarely fed, and frequently deprived of water. Occasionally, she was tied to the railing of the basement stairs with her feet barely touching the ground. On October 25th, Sylvia attempted to escape from the basement after overhearing a conversation, after overhearing Giroud say they were just going to leave her to die in the basement.
That's when she took action.
Sylvia attempted to flee to the front door, however, due to her extensive injuries and general weakness, Giroud caught her before she could escape the property. And on the morning of October 26, 1965, Sylvia Lyon tragically succumbed to her injuries and died in the basement. Her cause of death was a combination of severe malnutrition, physical trauma, and the overall abuse she endured. Her body was found with numerous injuries, including broken bones and extensive scarring, and the autopsy showed that there was more than 150 wounds across her body. Giroud was found guilty of first-degree murder, and she was sentenced to life in prison. But
that's a damn monster, bro.
Somehow, she was released in 1985 on parole.
What?
Which is just sickening. She deserves to be underneath the prison. This is just absolutely horrifying. The Sylvia Lyons case is a heartbreaking and disturbing true crime story that continues to captivate and horrify people to this day. There's a lot more I could talk about in this case, so if you want a part 2, let me know. Rest in peace to Sylvia Lyons, and I can't believe this case.
Rest in peace.
This little girl was kidnapped in 2018 and has just been found.
Really?
On the 25th of October 2018, 4-year-old Aranza Lopez was on a supervised visit with her biological mum. Her mum, Esmeralda, was being investigated over abuse allegations, so Aranza was actually in foster care at the time. Damn. It was arranged that the pair would have a supervised visit at a Washington shopping center.
Okay.
However, during the visit, Esmeralda requested to take Aranza to the toilets and used the opportunity to snatch the little girl in a stolen vehicle. The FBI were notified and a huge search for Aranza, and even advertised a $10,000 reward. It wasn't until a year later that Esmeralda was found and arrested, but there was still no sign of the little girl. That was until last month.
Okay.
She was recovered by Mexican authorities in February in western Mexico. In 2021, Esmeralda was actually extradited back to Washington State and pled guilty to second-degree kidnapping and robbery. She was sentenced to 20 months in prison. This woman screamed, "I don't want to die," as she was dragged to her death in a horrifying theme park incident. Kelty Burn was a Canadian student, animal trainer, and competitive swimmer.
Okay.
She was working at Sealand of the Pacific to earn extra money, and this involved being trained to work with orcas, otherwise known as killer whales. In controversial theme parks such as Sealand of the Pacific and SeaWorld, huge animals are either bred in captivity or traumatically captured and ripped apart from their families.
Isn't there like a whole documentary on Sealand or something?
On February the 20th, 1991, Kelty was working a shift and 3 whales were in one of the pools, including the infamous Tilikum. In a horrific turn of events, Kelty accidentally slipped and fell into the whale pool and attempted to grab onto the edge and save herself. However, before she could do so, she was grabbed by one of the whales that dragged her into the pool. The 3 whales then began throwing Kelty around, with many speculating that they may have simply thought this was a game. Others theorised that the whales were so traumatised and angered by their lives in tiny little pools that they took it out on Kelty. She was dragged under the water and then back up, screaming, "I don't want to die." After this horrific ordeal, she eventually drowned. It's reported that she was absolutely covered in bruises, was completely battered, and also covered in teeth marks.
I guess you gotta free those whales from captivity, man. They don't like being kept in cages. Says something's under that stairwell.
If I didn't know this was a true crime case, I would think it was a disturbing horror film. On the morning of the 7th of October 2022, a barefoot woman was running around Excelsior Springs, Missouri, bashing on people's doors. Witnesses describe her looking like she came straight from a horror film, and she was calling for help. She'd been beaten, held captive, and SA'd for weeks.
Damn.
The woman was a shocking sight. She was covered in injuries and was wearing a bin bag. Disturbingly, she was gasping for breath as she had a very tight metal collar locked around her neck.
Damn.
It was a nurse who opened the door to her and let her come in.
It's a nurse.
The nurse started to call police, and at this point the woman panicked. She warned her that the captor would kill her and claimed that he had killed her 2 friends.
Really?
When police got there, the woman explained that a man called Timothy had captured her the month prior. He'd been holding her hostage this whole time. She said he'd been keeping her locked in the basement and had been SAing her. Disturbingly, she told police that he actually had a young son who lived at the house with him.
Damn,
when Timothy had taken his young son to school the one day, she used it as an opportunity to escape. Police made their way to the home of 39-year-old Timothy Haslett Jr. and found the property did in fact have a basement like the woman described. Timothy was arrested and is facing 9 charges, including first-degree kidnapping. He's being held on a $3 million bond and faces 5 life sentences. Before his arrest, police were actually called to his address 3 times.
So they knew.
Twice they were asked to do welfare checks, and this was from an employer and also family members. Police have searched his home with cadaver dogs, and they haven't yet released what they know.
They found something. Had to. YouTube, that's it, man, for this video for you guys today, man. Like I said, guys, I appreciate the feedback, man. Like I said, going forward, I'm talking less, man. Just gonna save my thoughts until like after the video, man, so guys, we can take in this information together, man. Like I said, I appreciate this criticism, bro. Tell me, man, in the comments, what can I do, man, to make this experience more enjoyable for y'all, man. Like I said, I'm here to if you can give this information to you guys. So I appreciate the support. Guys, gonna catch you in the next one, man. Like I said, we're going forward. I'm out. Peace, YouTube.